Are you guys ready? Come on, it's past 10 o'clock. Are you guys ready? Wonderful. So we have a big day ahead. We have a day full of panels and fireside chats. So we won't take any questions during the sessions, but our speakers are more than happy to speak with you after their respective sessions in the hallway. So we'll start our track with a keynote. And for this keynote, I'm going to invite someone who has physics major, is as geek as one can be, and yet he became a very successful salesperson. He's as comfortable with carpentry and gardening as he is with getting a room full of people energized with his vision about how big data is going to change their lives forever. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct pleasure to invite Steve Shine, a very charismatic president and CEO of Actian.
Okay, that's a rather scary setup for an introduction. It sort of sets me up as a nuclear carpenter or something like that. So always beware of what you tell the MCs when they ask you, tell us a little bit about yourself. I didn't realize that there would be carpentry and gardening and things like this. But I am a geek. I have pockets full of gadgets. I do live on the road. I have spent a large part of my professional career on the road, visiting customers and partners. It's a fascinating role. I don't have an office. All I do is I live on the road. I turn up at our many offices around the world, and I just park myself anywhere because it's the best way to be as agile as you possibly can. So I am a geek from that perspective. I can be working from absolutely anywhere. Just a couple of minutes on Actian, for those of you that wouldn't be familiar. So everything that we do is around data. We help our customers to transform their business through looking at data strategically. And just a little bit of scale, we're about 450 people, $140 million company. We're very global. We have offices all around the world. And the couple of examples of customers that use our solutions, if you're familiar with Amazon Redshift, that's our platform. It runs on our platform, Redshift. If you look at the risk platforms that the big investment banks run, a lot of those are running on our big data and analytics platform. So a lot of organizations out there that are really at the forefront of what you can do with big data. That's Actian. I was asked to come up here and essentially to a theme of act fast or fail. And actually it's one that I'm a firm believer on because for several years now I have been traveling around the world and in all different parts of the world and talking to, as I said, customers and prospects. And there is a real change going on. And what I'd like to be able to do is just give you a little bit of a feel for the fact that that the change and the adoption of people looking at big data practices and looking at analytics is going to move much faster than we imagine. And I'm going to see if I can share it a little bit with you in terms of stories I've had from around the globe on my travels. So the first thing, we all know that that data is growing, and when you look at the first keynotes today, everybody knows it's about Google and Facebook and Twitter and NSA and all these types of things. Everybody sees that all the enterprises are now, as fast as possible, moving some of their core business systems into the cloud. Okay? They're doing that for reasons of scale, agility, performance. It's dramatic how fast the cloud side of enterprises is happening. This morning we made an announcement where we've partnered with NetSuite. Part of the platform that we have enables NetSuite's customers to be able to seamlessly connect to other SaaS-based applications and their on-premise environments, because if you can't do that, if you can't connect and share information, then the move to the cloud is pointless. And therefore, that's the first step for us, is how do you connect to all that digitally born data that's out there today? So the cloud is one aspect of it. The other theme that you see here at TiEcon is obviously the Internet of Things. And here's where I take a pause. We've spent a long time trying to understand what does it actually mean, because it is a very vague term. And we're now very convinced that we are only at the very start of the age of big data. We're only at the very start of the scale and impact of what people are going to be able to do. And when you actually think about, it was great to hear the Watson session on what people are doing around healthcare devices that you're wearing. I look at home automation. I mean, the speed with which home automation is going to happen. It makes me laugh when, everybody knows the story of it took 10 years for Walmart to generate 100 terabytes, and people like Yahoo do that in a day. Everybody knows the story of you have a terabyte of data when you fly from an engine when you fly across the Atlantic. All that's changing now. That's from 10 sensors that were in that engine. They're going to put hundreds of sensors in those engines. They're going to digitally sensitize everything out there so that they know the status of all the physical assets that are out there, the environment. Okay, we know about traffic patterns and we know about weather patterns, but what about pollution, the ocean currents? Everything is going to be fed into, and we're going to have a digital awareness of what's going on around us that has not even really started at this point. And if I were to summarize, the one thing that I think that I've seen change in the last year, it is that I think a lot of technologists, a lot of people in this room have seen this coming. Right? A little bit of doubt as to how fast it's going to happen. When you go out and you talk to business people, last year it was actually quite difficult for me to meet with business people. Most of the time you met with CIOs, and the CIOs were in anticipation. They probably have a Hadoop project somewhere, and they were sort of figuring it out. Okay? From now, nearly every meeting that I do as I travel around the world is with business people, and it is not just the major Western countries. So I was in Turkey last week. It's 80 million people in Turkey. Some phenomenal businesses out there. Met with one of the major banks and the major e-commerce retailer. And you sit down, they're very, very sophisticated with their business practices. Okay? They have multi-channel customer marketing programs, everything you would imagine. The digital marketing programs they run are spectacular. These business leaders are sitting there and they're asking the question, right now I'm doing all this at what is the traditional average, sort of average view of how I market to customers. They're now starting to say, I want to be able to do this for every single customer. So the e-commerce retailer, they have 13 million customers that buy online, and they have 50,000 SKUs, products, and there are between 5 and 500 variations on any one of those SKUs. And what they're doing is they're saying, I want to be able to market to every individual the right product in the right time frame. Okay? So business leaders have woken up. And I think we should be very well aware of that. If you look at the early phase of big data projects, there was a great stat this morning about that, a lot of them are failing. Not anymore. I'm starting to see more and more. The demand that's coming out, though, is changing. It was an IT-led project and would typically have a 6, 9, 12-month program. The business is demanding real shrinkage in that time frame, real changes in what goes on. So the theme of this talk, the act fast or fail, I'm actually trying to instill a little bit of urgency in you. Okay? If you're there as a customer of big data, if you're there as an innovator in that market, don't believe that the business hasn't woken up to it, and don't believe that they are now going to be demanding huge efforts from their IT departments and from their service providers, you in this audience, and it's coming at a faster rate than I possibly imagined. That's both a complexity and a challenge for all of us, but it's an enormous opportunity. And this is why. Everybody knows these figures. The amount of data that people actually analyze today is actually a fraction of what's out there. And the value associated with it, these are figures from a McKinsey chart, are truly staggering. Okay? And I think that people will start to see that these numbers, that $15 trillion of value, is going to be much larger than that. But actually, the figure to dwell on is if you look back in the last 2 to 3 years, the number of organizations that were able to tap into the value of big data was a tiny fraction of the number of organizations out there, less than 1%. That's going to change. There are doubters out there. I still meet doubters out there that don't believe that that there is real value to be had. So, if you come across that, there is a terrific report. It's a McKinsey report. This is a McKinsey study. They have studied at a great deal of detail. And the simple message is this. Those organizations that do look at and treat data inside and around their organization, data that's relevant, do outperform their competitors. So what actually happens out there? If you actually look at the type of conversations, when I now go in to meet customers and prospects, the type of thing they're looking at are, we used to look at churn. So we've talked to a couple of in retail and telco where they used to want to be able to predict who's going to leave. Okay? And we're all starting to see this, but the business has woken up to the fact that when they went into their CRM system and they found that they could get about a 5% accuracy from looking at the data in their CRM system of who was going to leave their mobile network. Okay? What we've been doing is working with organizations, and you see more and more people are doing this, is they're saying, well, what if I don't just look at my CRM environment? What if I also look at all the device records? So who's got a really smart phone and who's got a dumb phone? Okay? Who actually uses what applications on there? What network call rate success is there? Where are the failures as the more important customers travel around on my network? And when you run machine-based learning programs over that data, over enough of that data, you can actually go from a 5% accuracy we went to actually over 80% accuracy. And it was mentioned before at the Watson program. What's really important is this. It's not, hey, these people are going to leave. Because you're looking at multiple sets of data, you're able to actually say they're probably likely to leave for the following reasons. So for an example, I'm a geek. Okay? I love the latest technology. So if I'm on a mobile network that traps me with a phone that's out of date, but I'm an extremely profitable customer, then surely what they should do is if part of their data is in the world of gathering the competitive information on promotions, the moment they know there's a competitive promotion, they should reach out to me and say, here you go, Steve, here's your upgrade. Forget it, you don't need to see out the end of the term. It's a very, very simple program. It's a very simple thing to do. But being able to get that prediction, that accuracy of that prediction, is what people are pursuing. It's absolutely vital. Being able to understand from looking at enough data, there's a certain group of people in this room, and they're so similar, and we've watched what they do in the past, and from it, we actually know with an extremely high degree of accuracy what this individual is likely to do next. Okay? And if you think about that, that is both a big data discovery problem, but it's also a time issue. Because if I'm the call rep and a customer calls up, okay, I have a few seconds to basically say, who is this person? What is the pattern of what is the next best recommendation for that individual? I am probably running that over billions of records, and I need the answer in a few seconds to essentially say, we know there is an 80% chance that this person will buy this next service if you offer it. These are the types of business innovation and transformations that people are looking for. Risk is an obvious one, whether it be in the financial services area or whether it be in security. Lots and lots of different areas. But the message here is the business people have woken up. They understand the difference between programmatic and probabilistic. Okay? They understand that there is a difference between sampling and being able to do really detailed programs. If you actually go out there, this chart, if I'd shown it last year, actually I probably wouldn't have shown this last year because there were very few that were up on the top right-hand quadrant. Now, I would say that there are lots and lots and lots of organizations that are trying to get into that, the third phase, the predictive phase. The really sophisticated ones are now saying, what I learned from that discovery over all that data, and also each of the individual events of data, I am actually going to feed back into real-time business processes. There are some really advanced business models out there where people are treating big data as a strategic tool to design their business processes and optimize them, and they are way ahead of their competition. So we went out there and we looked at what are the basic characteristics, what drives best practice out there. The first one's an obvious one, scale. If you look at more data, you get a better prediction of what's going to happen. If you combine different data sets and you find those correlations, you get real revelations, really, really different revelations. We're starting to see up and down the supply chain. So when you go to a bank says, here's the data I'm looking at. They've got, let's take a credit card. I'm running credit cards, sophisticated credit card fraud programs, which have been out there for years, and they're running that, and I'm in Turkey, and they say, oh, Steve Shine's in Turkey, he's never been to Turkey before, big transaction, must be fraud. They lock it out when I'm entertaining customers. Very, very embarrassing for me, okay? And then their banking head of customer relations comes and says, hey, why did you lock Steve's card out? Okay, and they say, well, you know, our program said that it was highly fraudulent. So now what they're doing is the customer relationship guy saying, how can I get a better fix on this? How do I know whether Steve was there or not? So they're now talking to mobile providers. And they're saying, wouldn't it be good if we knew that when that odd credit card transaction was taking place, that within about 5 or 10 meters, Steve's mobile phone was there? Okay? That fraud risk just came down to a fraction of what they were able to do before. So that sort of correlation of data sets that is actually up and down the supply chain, if the message I'm giving you here is, these are the business people thinking through these problems. The business people is now applying a great deal of pressure. Performance is everything, okay? The difference between being first and being within the right time frame. So do I get that ad to you before you go to somebody else's website is the difference between winning and losing. And that's a problem. When you are looking at that much data, performance tends to be the thing that loses. And so being able to make sure that you can deliver on performance at the same time as scale is extremely important. People are starting to look at data differently. Do you remember the days when enterprise data warehouses pour all the data into the bucket, and then periodically I'll see what's happening? And I might run some aggregated predictions of the future. All that's changing. The most sophisticated companies realize that that digital tap I mentioned, it's on, it's not turning off, and they are asking their IT groups to think of data as a constant stream of data. One that they want to be able to model discovery and insight, but also be able to take action on real-time events. This one's an obvious one. There's still an awful lot of organizations that look into that traditional phase one bucket of data and say, what just happened? Right? More and more people are making major investments in the analytics that they need there too. And this one's the one that I think is really important and is probably foremost in any organization that has an awful lot of individual customers, and that's this segment of one. It's this idea of I don't want to know about men that are aged between 40 and 50 that happen to live in this area with an income range of this. Okay? They want to know about Steve Shine. Okay? And they want to know, what is he most likely to buy and why? Where does that come from? And they're looking for as high an accuracy on doing that segment of one marketing or risk analysis. And then the last one that I think is a big differentiator out here, and I think this is what we're seeing as a big trend, is time to value. If the projects are taking you 6 to 9 months and somebody else can do it in a number of weeks, okay, you lose. And so people are starting to say, and the business, it is remarkable how the business is starting to get very creative about thinking about what's the next source of data that I should be looking at. Okay? If I'm a logistics business, and yeah, sure, I've been looking at what's my operational best route, but what about all the weather patterns, and what about all the traffic patterns that are out there, and what's next on the line for me? What's the next piece of data? What about all the major concerts that are out there in the world? How's that going to impact my logistics? It's the business people that are coming up with this, and they're going to constantly ask IT to deliver new sets of data into that pool that they analyze to improve their accuracy. We all know this isn't easy. It's actually really hard. It's really expensive. Most of the traditional architectures that are in place today to deliver on this, frankly, don't work. They either can't scale, or the cost of it is just too high, or they just don't deliver the underlying performance. And here's what happens. This is the most common dialogue that I see in customers and prospects today. On the one side, you have the business saying, hey, I want this, and I want this, and I want this, okay? Because they're seeing their competition doing this, and they're reading all about all these big data initiatives that are out there. And IT sits there that has a set of technology standards about the infrastructure that they use, and they sit there and they go, I can't do it, or I need more budget. And there's this constant do loop of nothing. And the amount of time that is being spent out there at the moment having that debate is a little bit soul-destroying. And that's what's driven a lot of the interest that you see in Hadoop. The discussions that I've had for a long time now is there are so many Hadoop and NoSQL projects out there where IT's feeling that pressure and they're saying, look, I don't really have a project at the moment, but I just need to figure out how I break out of the traditional architecture model that just doesn't get me there. You can't stay in that do-nothing loop. You can't stay there. This is a little bit dramatic, okay? It's not always failure, but when you are constantly outperformed by your competitors, okay, life gets really hard. The board and senior management are coming down and they are saying, you have got to be able to make this change. So you need to be able to break out of this. And I wanted to give you just a couple of examples. I was going to pick, these are a couple of our customers, one at the top and one at the bottom. So Yahoo, yeah, it's big data, okay? For them, monetization of advertising is everything. So being able to understand from billions of records of people coming onto their web real estate, somebody that's looking to buy a flight, okay, and being able to recognize that and then recognize what they're doing on the website and essentially be able to say, where is the point when I know that I should reach into and get the optimum advertising in front of that person, okay, is the difference. And if you think about it, time is everything. They actually run about 80 terabytes of data in memory. They're constantly running algorithms to be able to say, when is the best time and the best type of advert to put in front of that person? It's the difference between advertisers paying with Yahoo or paying with somebody else. If you look at the other end of the spectrum, Evernote, most of you will be familiar with Evernote, phenomenal digestion and generation of data. When you actually look at what they're doing, though, they have really sophisticated models running over hundreds of millions of records of data of the events of what you and I do when we're using Evernote. And what they're trying to do is say, we can actually start to see patterns of when the most likely time of someone being receptive to going from the free to the premium model. Okay, and that window doesn't last very long. Okay, and if you don't get them there, they pass on and they forget about it and they stay on the free. So they do an enormous amount of very sophisticated analytics, and the window of time, as I said, it's a few minutes, hours. You might be lucky if it's a day where it's in the person's head. So if you actually get there, this is the path that we're seeing people going, and this is the change that I see today. So traditional, it doesn't work. It's too expensive. It's too slow. The heavy lifting is just too hard. Phase one, the big data phase one was everybody out there with, if you look at the big data technologies, they're fabulous. Okay? But in the early stage, like any technology, actually a little bit of heavy lifting, a little bit hard to use, new skills, performance is a bit of an issue. People have been struggling with that. Well, the Hadoop community has done a truly fabulous job, still have a long way to go, but in industrializing in that environment. And that's what really allows the next phase. And this is really where we've been focusing. So we provide a set of functionality that enables you to do this. All this data's over here, and all the analytical outcomes are on this side. And what I want to be able to do is digest, connect to that data, and then pull that through. But it's got to be easy. You've got to be able to let more people access. So you've got to have that sort of graphical tool to be able to build those flows of data and those analytical streams. It's essential. You've got to be able to put a radically disruptive performance alternative, a cost alternative in there for people to make that investment. There is a real change. There are more and more offerings out there that are now enabling more people. That 1% that you saw on the early chart is expanding at a radical rate where people are realizing that they can really use new environments and they really can do sophisticated segment of one analytics at a scale they couldn't dream of before, and it's very usable. Okay? This is happening just in the last year. I've seen so much change in that capability. So last slide, but one, how do we visualize this? It's a whole bunch of noise out there. When you actually bring in all that data, what is the question that I should be asking out there? And then how on earth do I channel that into something that's meaningful? There are a lot of big data projects out there that are about technology and not about the business outcome. Okay? But as I said, that is really changing. The business users are starting to think about, how do I deal with customer delight? How do I drive competitive advantage? How do I manage risk and compliance? And then some really sophisticated ones are starting to say, actually, I'll give you an example. My data may actually be more important than the current business I run. Think of HR and benefits. If you think about that, there are some huge organizations that provide HR and benefits. They actually know everything about the pay scales, pay rises, who's leaving, by geography, by industry. They know some really phenomenal information, macroeconomic information that organizations would pay dearly for. And that's before you tap into the benefits side of it. And so when you combine all of that, they're actually starting to realize that maybe there are some even more valuable, even more differentiated business models out there. So as I said, our approach to this is, like others, we've built out a platform that says the time for you to tap into data and turn that into analytical outcomes is everything. It's the difference between being a winner or a loser. For us, being able to make sure that we understood those best-in-class characteristics of what are the best people doing there and building that into the platforms is incredibly important. And if I can just leave you with my final point, okay, this act fast or fail, I would just say this. First mover advantage, everybody talks about it. Okay, it's here, it's right now. So if you are in big data, if you are out there, if you were ever going to make a big push, all right, and become the owner of that first mover advantage, either as a vendor or if you're there as a customer, somebody who's digesting this, then now's the time to get ahead. Okay, because everybody's waking up to it. And there are certain geographies in the world that don't have the ball and chain of a lot of traditional technology that limits them. They are leapfrogging. Be aware of that, and it's both a threat, but it's also a super opportunity. So many of the people in this room are going to be leaders of tomorrow. I wish you well. Just act fast. Thank you very much.